Haven't got my microphone on. There we go. Hello, good evening. I'm hoping now that you can hear me and see me. It's very nice to be here for, I'm still getting to grips with everything for this edition of Not a Collection of Parts. So I'm a little bit late this week. Thank you for joining me. This week we're going to be talking a little bit about vertigo. And I'm hopefully going to be able to see the, where are we going on here now? Is this happening here now? No, we've got, hopefully that's happening anyway. So this week I wanted to talk a little bit about vertigo and what I think is missing. And the reason I wanted to talk about that was because it's something that has happened to me a few years ago. I had this horrible condition. I think it was linked with a bit of stress or whatever else was going on. And I was driving along the motorway one day, and it felt like the car was going to tip over. I had to sort of, how I didn't crash, I don't really know. And so it really was quite awful. And I was diagnosed with benign positional vertigo, and I just didn't really, what was it? Well, a lot of adults have it. That's just how it goes. Not much we can do about it. And that's really what it sort of ended up. It just went away by itself in the end, and things like blood pressure and what have you. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also a bit about what I think is missing. So without further ado, let's crack on, have a little look at it, and with our first, our second, third week, whatever it is, Not a Collection of Parts, and it's. The first thing we have to establish is the difference between dizziness and vertigo. So there is a reasonably distinct difference. We're going to have the concept of dizziness it's an umbrella term, and it covers spinning, lightheaded, unbalanced, wooziness, anything you want to care to name. Somebody's put something strange in your cigarette or whatever it happens to be. We've all experienced dizziness. You get up a little bit too quickly, a little bit of benign hypertension or what have you. And it looks like that. I'm not going to put the video on that. The fairs in town where I live at the moment, and there's the waltzes and spinning around, absolutely not. It is. I don't mind the thing that sort of twizzes out like that, but I'm not going to go on a waltzer. I did it a few years ago as a kid, and all the thing that spins you and pushes you back to the wall. Not having any of that. So vertigo is a specific form of dizziness, and where one experiences a spinning sensation. You feel like your surroundings are moving around you, or that you're moving, and it's quite unpleasant. It can be linked to a brain tumor, but it's the most common type of dizziness that we have. So it is a type of dizziness, but it is very specific, and there are ways of diagnosing it in terms of head movement and eye movement. As I said, it can be linked to brain tumors, strokes, MS, migraines, and it can be caused by things like toxins such as carbon monoxide, alcohol, or aspirin. And some things like permanent damage carbon monoxide obviously is going to kill you before anything else, but it can be hanging around for quite some time. Very difficult to treat. There is something called the Epley maneuver, and we will have a little look at that very shortly or later on in terms of what it's doing. But I wanted to take a step back and have a little look at the trifecta, if you like, of what we're talking about as far as balance and diagnosis is concerned, because there is a quite a distinct difference between how we get this diagnosis and what balance means. So if we're going to go into the idea of balance, then we have to understand that it's not just one thing. We think of balance as far as the inner ear is concerned, but actually there are several aspects to it, and there are several major parts of the body working together. The first one, of course, is the visual system. We understand if you're on a ship and you're moving around, you seeing the horizon, all that kind of stuff makes a difference. So there is a visual system. We can understand that. The vestibular system, the principles of the ear, the fluid-filled, coiled, sort of like shells in the ear that are telling us, again, balance, but also proprioception, where the understanding of where our body is in time and space. It's a very, very big deal. We need to understand what's happening to us, where we are at any given point in time. So degeneration or loss of function in any of those systems is going to lead to balance deficits. So there are more than just the eyes and the ears that we have to deal with here. So in other words, we need to know where all our bits are at any point in time. We need to know what's going on. We need to have an idea of that. So there was a really interesting little bit of paper when I was looking to see what joins up, and I heard about this idea of this, which intrigued me a few years ago on a podcast, which you may have heard of, called No Such Thing as a Fish. Can thoroughly recommend it. It's very very amusing, and they have some really interesting sort of sciencey bits in there. And it's come from the team that were the researchers, or still are the researchers. Maybe they're doing this full time now. I don't know. Behind QI, and so the little elves from QI would come up with stuff, and they had this podcast that goes out, and there's hundreds of episodes out there now, and I really do recommend that you have a listen to it if you possibly can on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. But this little piece of research was something I was looking around after I heard this on No Such Thing as, I forgot what it's called then, No Such Thing as a Fish. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could find that. I can't find the episode that it relates to, so if anybody does come across it. But the point that we're making was that the idea of that the lower limbs are very, or as indicated in balance in as the inner ear is. And this paper comes up to that. And so what it's saying is, this is a study on the vestibular contribution to balance control in the medial and gastrocnemius and psoas, in other words, the calf muscles. And what they came up with, the statements that they made within this, was that the control of standing balance is a multi-sensory, we've already looked at that, multi-sensory vision system consisting of vision, vestibular, auditory, and somatosensory. So somata refers to the body, sensory refers to obviously sense. It's a multi-sensory process which requires the coordination of postural muscles throughout the body. And this coordination is particularly important. That's my emphasis, not theirs. Particularly important where the soleus and the gastrocnemius muscles generate the plantar flexion for movement that counteracts the forward toppling of the body to maintain vertical position. So this is the issue here, is that it's particularly important. This is what it's saying. It's particularly important at the ankles. So it's the soleus and the gastrocnemius. Now, not just soleus and gastrocnemius, and we're going to see why in a minute. But in other words, balance is not just an inner ear issue. And we could be fairly confident and clear, and there's enough research out there that's demonstrating that we understand that as we stand up, if we are imbalanced, then we are not going to be able to be functional. And we've talked a lot about stability and mobility, but think about being on a pair of skis. You can on a pair of ice skates, or even just walking along a pavement that's very, very icy. You can feel that instability that's going along there. And so the training process is important for us to understand where our balance is coming from as far as our whole body system is concerned. So if we look at a really good example here, this is a favourite pastime of climbers. If you ever hang out with climbers, it won't be long before you'll see that they want to get themselves on a slack line. And the slack line is quite the opposite of a tightrope, in as much as it's slack. It's not tight. You're not walking across a tightrope. You're walking across a slack, wobbly sort of line. And then when you get good at it, that just what you saw there is pretty impressive. But when you get good at it, you'll see these guys, and it's this sort of an advanced slack line, and there he is. He's balancing on that. But look, the head is pretty still. And all this movement that's going on through the arms, through the legs, that's quite an advanced way of doing that. And look how slack that line is. It's sort of going up behind him. And so another look at that, because it's kind of cool. I can't do that. I'd be on the ground, strung between two trees, and he's got the whole climbing look about him. So the positioning, we can understand that. The positioning of our feet, the positioning of our body, the positioning of our arms, our shoulders are all going to, if we're walking along a narrow plank, we're going to put our arms out. So we understand that there's a physical aspect to it, and that the balance isn't just coming from the inner ear, that there is some other stuff involved as well. Meaning, what's my point here? Perhaps that the body is not a collection of parts. Funny that. There we go. So let's get on to the next thing that we have that says, well, how do we get a diagnosis and what does that look like? And the word diagnosis is kind of an interesting one. Pressing the wrong button here. Okay, he's still balancing on that. So the word diagnosis is coming from the Greek gnosis, meaning knowledge. And I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I shall probably get told if I'm not. So I'm sure somebody will jump in and let me know. And it's a process determining the nature of a disease or disorder and distinguishing it from other possible conditions. So we get that, right? We get that idea of what's wrong with me. I need to know what's wrong with me, and somebody will come up with a name for our condition. The trouble is that we don't have really the culture that goes backwards from that. And medicine, as a doctor has described this years ago to me, that said it's a lot like imagine you're walking along a riverbank and you see somebody falling in, and you jump in and you drag them out, drag them to the side, and they've been drowning, and you give them, well, you don't do mouth to mouth anymore, but you resuscitate them, and off they go, and you've saved their life, you've done the job, and you've done an amazing thing. All right, and you're just about to go off and carry on your walk when you see somebody else falling in the water, and you jump in and you drag them to the side, and you give them their resuscitation, and then you're just about to go off and somebody else does, and so on and so forth. And you're so busy jumping in and dragging people out to the side that you haven't really got time to walk back upstream and find out why they're falling in the first place. And that's really a lot of what goes on as far as medicine is concerned. It's not anybody's fault. It's just the fact that that's how it is, that we haven't really got that as an option. It's a bit of a luxury. So what we have to be considering, therefore, is, do we have the full picture? If we've already seen that there are that it's a multi-system element, the balance is a multi-system element, then how can we comfortably sit back and go, well, have I checked everything out? My questions will be that if we don't look at all the body systems involved, then can we be sure that we've got the diagnosis right? If also we improve one system, does it mean that the other system is going to have some benefit as well? That by working on one bit, we've actually then also helped another bit. This is what we might have to look at, and so therefore we have to look at some of that the research that's going on as far as that's concerned. So I'm just going to have a quick look at that. Any comments that are in here? So okay, so where are we? Let's go back. So I wanted to make clear also one thing is that really we have to, as therapists, from my perspective, I'm careful about. I don't want to get into the whole idea of diagnosis or treating a specific condition, and I want to work with what I refer to as the first law of natural cure. The first law of natural cure that some chap called Malcolm Stemp came up with, or said to me, maybe it wasn't his, but a few years ago, is that the body be treated as a whole without referral to named disease. And I think that's really, really important. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even interested in that kind of way of working where we're going specifically, right, this is what you're presenting with, this is what's wrong with you. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I'm not going to look at problem solving. That doesn't mean to say that I'm not going to be looking at why something is the way that it is. That's not the same thing. But what I'm saying is that I'm not going to say, right, you have got this condition because you've got X, Y, and Z. And the reason I want to get into that is because the condition is kind of a bit dull. There's a whole process in leading up to it, and there's a whole process involved in it, and there's a whole load of behaviours. And people will often say to me, oh, you've got this and this. What do you recommend as far as Bowen is concerned? It's like, well, what's the problem? Oh, well, the problem is they've got, insert name of condition. It's like, that's not the problem. The problem is whatever it is they're coming to you with, and it might be a terminal condition. It doesn't make any difference as far as I'm concerned. The point is this, is that it's not the condition really that I'm interested in looking at. I'm interested in how it affects them, what else is going on, what are the results of it, because it may or may not be that that their problem goes away. That's not the issue, but they may have a better quality of life. There may be all kinds of other things involved in that. So I'm very keen to emphasize the law of natural cure here. But at the same time, what I also want to do is I want to look at the whole picture. The body is not a collection of parts. So we understand the principle of balance, and we understand what that looks like. And then what we're going to look at here is another little study which came up in the American Journal of Geriatrics, or geriatricians, as it were. And what was being looked at here was the fact that people who were self-reporting the fact that because they were a bit deaf, they had a bit of hearing loss that was going on with them. And what they found was that this was therefore affecting the way that they were able to get up and go and do other things in their life. There was a big impact on the rest of their lives, particularly as far as things like lower limb tests were concerned. That when it was tested, when they looked at, they found that the people who reported major hearing problems were also the same people that were indicating poor performance and having more difficulties in active living, and they had this thing which is called the SPPB, which is the short physical performance battery, and tests administered, and found that they scored lower in that, and that they also struggle to do the things that they would normally do. So why are we saying this? Because I find this very, very interesting, that people that are reporting deafness, we're looking at somatosensory systems, we've got vision, we've got vestibular systems as well, but they're also now reporting normal active daily living is an issue, in particularly poor lower limb performance. And I think that's really interesting. So again, I go back to the previous question. If we improve the lower limb performance, if we help them as far as their lower limb is concerned, does it therefore mean that it's going to help them as far as their hearing is concerned? Not necessarily. That's not the link I'm trying to make. What I'm trying to say is that the active daily living might improve, and so therefore their noticeable problem that they have, the fact that they're upset about their hearing loss, may be less of an issue. I wanted to have a quick look at also there's a treatment that is used to treat vertigo. Let's see if I can find it here now, and it's called the Epley maneuver. So we're just going to get that up a little bit if we can, and show you that. Where are we? There we go. So if I've got to that one there. So the Epley maneuver is quite successful in relation to treating people with there we go, for vertigo. It's going to get that up here now. It's an interesting video. This a bit long. I'm just going to show you the bits of it that are interesting. And it's basically a way of moving the head and holding it there for a certain period of time in order to be able to then break down these crystals. There's something called canalization, which is which takes place in the ear. So let's just have a quick look at that. If we can just pop that over there and put the microphone sound on for that. There we go. So
normally only with head movement does fluid within the inner ear also move, informing the brain that a head turn occurred. However, should a crystal called an otolith gets displaced into the posterior canal of the inner ear, BPPV dizziness occurs. Fluid movement occurs due to the crystal rather than head turns, causing the brain to think movement has occurred even though none has happened. When the Epley maneuver is performed to treat this posterior canal BPPV by trying to get the loose crystal out of the canal, this maneuver is started by turning the head 45 degrees and the body laid back such that the head is extended about 20 to 30 degrees. The direction of this initial head turn is formally determined by the Dix-Hallpike maneuver. That said, the initial head turn is typically towards the side that more severely triggers the dizziness. If BPPV is present, eye twitching called nystagmus will occur. After 30 to 60 seconds, the head turn is turned 90 degrees to the opposite side and held for another 30 to 60 seconds.
So the key to that is the length of time that it's being held, and I think that's really the thing we're going to look at, that you're holding it for a certain period of time. And it's and from what I can understand, again looking at the literature, is that it is fairly successful in relation to vertigo as far as changing these little crystals that are in the ear. but it does return quite often, and for some people, just doing that is pretty horrific as far as just getting there, the actual movement. But so you get somebody that's got really bad positional vertigo, and they're going to throw up doing it. There's another procedure that was referred to there, which is all about how you get movement through the eye as far as the diagnosis is concerned. So where are we now? So we've already looked at the fact that the lower limb muscles are, the literature tells us that the lower limb muscles are considered to be linked in here. So let's have a quick look at these, because there's a bit in there which I think is always missed, and I'd like to draw your kind attention to this. So we'll go quickly look at the lower limb muscles. We've got the gastrocnemius, and these are calf muscles, and they move around quite happily, sort of one sliding across the top of the other. There's no particular thickening and sticking in there, but they are quite a sort of a slippery surface over the top, but they're also quite firmly pinned down as well. If we take the gastrocs off, we go to our next layer here, then our next one down here is our soleus, and we've got the nerve running underneath it. Let's just get my pointer out in here. We've got the vein running down, the nerve running down, but if you look onto this side, you can see this little fella running down here. We're going to have a little closer look in this. And this is the thing that kind of gets not talked about. If you looked at that previous paper that talked about the lower limb muscles, there wasn't any mention of this. And this fella here is the plantaris, and there it is. I've just put a little highlight on there. And if we go to the next picture, this is how it comes down. So the plantaris comes down on the inside of the Achilles. This is the inside of the Achilles tendon down here. And you see how it's going right the way back round into that heel pad. And it's very, very tiny. And when people first see it, when the people first look at it, they go, "Oh, so what nerve is this?" And yeah, actually, it isn't a nerve. It's actually the longest tendon in the body. So if you're in a pub quiz anytime, then the longest tendon in the body is the plantaris. And the longest muscle in the body is the sartorius. So don't get confused with that. I'm going to shut that down because I want to show you something in a minute. But the longest tendon in the body is the plantaris. Now, what this fella does is it goes up. You don't know whether you've got one. Apparently, it is absent in quite a few people. This is what I believe. I haven't. I think I've seen one side where it's absent. Sometimes it's harvested to repair things like ACLs in the knees. But it's very, very thin, and I'll show you in dissection a little bit what it looks at. But when it goes up, so what you're looking at here, just to orientate yourself, is you're looking at the back of the leg. So the plantaris has gone up, and it's gone from the inside aspect of the Achilles, and it's crossed over, and it's ended up, and this is the fella here. This is where it is. And this is the femur. So it's going over the top of popliteus. This is popliteus in here. Over the top of it, and it's blending along to the lateral side, the outside edge, where it's going to meet vastus lateralis as a continuum. Now, what's it there for? Well, we'll come back to that in a second. But if we just have a quick look at its path as it travels up, let's see this, and there it is, going up the inside. It looks like it's really loose, and there it is, but and it's hitting to that side. And it has, of course, a lot of variation. There's a lot of variations where it's going. In this instance, it's looking at sort of curving itself around, a bit like a tadpole onto there. But there was a great dissector that I was hanging out with a couple of years ago called Ron Coots up in Scotland. Very talented and interesting man, and did a lot of anatomy study. And while we were up there, he did this dissection, which I'm going to show you here now. And it's an absolutely super dissection. He talks us through it. So let's have a quick look at this. And there we go.
Okay. So here we're looking at the lateral side of the leg, initially with the iliotibial band, reflecting that back, and then taking the biceps femoris, long head, attached to the fibular condyle, and through onto peroneus longus, and reflecting that back. And we can see this shiny fascia behind the vastus lateralis. Here we have the nerve, the tibial nerve, and the peroneal nerve, which we take out of there. and then we have the vascular bundle in between the condyles going down through the gastrocnemius. We've got the medial head of the gastrocnemius here, which goes superiorly around the medial condyle, as we would expect. But on the lateral side, when we lift the lateral head of the gastrocnemius, we'll find the plantaris and its tendon going distally to the medial side of the calcaneus. If we take that off, we can then see the continuous connection with the vastus lateralis and its fascia.
So you were surprised when you saw fibularis there, and how it vestigially comes across the top of that popliteus. So you were, when you brought that peroneus longus back, flapped it over again. This was your. Tell me what your surprise was.
My surprise is finding plantaris so small on the lateral condyle, but I expected it to be up here in the middle of the fossa. And I'm also very surprised that I didn't see the popliteus coming across here as a bigger muscle.
But also that continuation of plantaris into vastus lateralis.
Correct.
Yeah.
And also this pressure which the lateral head of the gastroc puts on the lateral condyle in plantar flexion. So it actually pushes the condyle forward.
Conclusions?
Conclusions that we can find more connections here than we would have previously thought possible. And we'll probably find more connections here at the back of the knee with the semi-membranosus as well. On this
So
side.
what we're seeing is that us superficially becomes a lot more lateral and deeper, particularly in relation to, say, lateral gastrocs and plantaris, and becomes more of a stabilised with its overlap.
Yeah. I anticipated the two heads of the gastroc coming round the condyles like that. But in fact it doesn't. Only the medial head goes around the condyle like that, and the lateral head actually holds the condyle down with its continuous connection to vastus lateralis, which we can't ignore.
So good old Ron looked very pleased with himself then. So that was really interesting to see that continuity, and I've done it several times since, that we can see that plantaris really happily carries on over the edge of that condyle into the vastus lateralis. That's quite superficial, and you can actually feel it on that edge, and I'll show you a little bit of where you can feel it and how you can feel it in a minute. If we just quickly have a look at this one as well. This is just a little dissection. There's no sound with this, but here's our Achilles. It's a slightly softer dissection. You can see this tiny little fella in here. There is our plantaris, and bearing in mind that's come down all the way from the inside of that heel, and you see how it's going underneath. There's a lift off the back of the gastrocs there, behind that superficial, that sort of anterior fascia, if you like, the deep fascia of it, and there it's travelling all the way up across the soft belly of the soleus. So it's sandwiching itself between the belly of the soleus and heading off to the medial side of the lateral side of the leg, rather. So the question then comes, well, what is it there for? If it's not doing much in terms of flexion of the knee, but we've already looked at the idea that plantaris is proprioceptive, that balance and it was requiring our vision, our vestibular system, and it's also, we've already seen the paper that said it's very important as far as the ankles are concerned, the feet are concerned, and there is our plantaris. And I think it's acting a little bit like a kite surfer. So if we look at the kite surfer, or anybody playing with a kite, they're leaning back on the ropes, and if you pull it one way, you pull it the other way. And we can think of the body in a similar way. We can say, well, here is the lower limb. What are the positions of the feet doing as we put our foot down? And if we have a connection, a tensional connection from the heel, from the inside, going across, that's kind of traversing up and then carrying through, like yogurt pots on a piece of string, that's carrying on through into the rest of our nervous system. It's telling us where our feet are, not just where our feet are in terms of on the ground, but the differentiation between the load, the tension, the movement, the rotation that's being sent through that. Now, if that information isn't getting through, if that information is poor or weak, perhaps there's lack of plantar flexion or movement through there, perhaps there's not there's too much tension, there's not enough muscle tone, whatever's going on, then we can see that this could potentiate a breakdown in communication where all those three things aren't working. Certainly over the years, I've had some incredible changes with people that are saying, look, I've had this horrible dizziness. It's very debilitating. And we do some work, we do a little bit of bone work down the back of their legs. And really then all I'm doing is just to try and mobilize the back of this Achilles in here. So, holding onto that, there it is. And we're just grabbing hold of that and moving all the way down to the inside edge, following that down. And sometimes you'll feel that it, if you reach across, you can feel this. So this is the lateral side of the leg, and this is the Achilles. I thought this was a video, actually, and you can feel this as it's running up the side of the leg, and sometimes you can feel it all the way up in there as well. There's a movement in there, so there it is, running from the inside. Like I said, you don't know whether you've got one or not, but something's going to take its place if it doesn't, and it's a really interesting little structure. So yeah, big changes with people with dizziness, vertigo. It's something that I was speaking to somebody yesterday that was trying to explain to me that they've had this condition, but everybody's looked at the area that is assumed to be the issue that is the vestibular system or the visual system. Now, you can have compression as far as the neck is concerned. There's all kinds of other neurological things going on, and I get that. That's absolutely fine, and I'm not saying we shouldn't look at those areas, but you've got to sort of sometimes think outside of the box. And there's a book by a chap called Matthew Said called Black Box Thinking, which talks about this, different ways of thinking, and that's really the way that I love to do it and love to think, and which is sort of, it floats my boat, if you like. That's really where I'm at. So thank you very much. I think that's, oh, hang on, what's gone on there? Don't know what's gone on there. But thank you very much for joining me. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week. I've got a couple of things in mind, but please, by all means, give me your suggestions. Let me know if there's anything you would like me to talk about, like to see. Along the lines of that the body is not a collection of parts. How can we explain something in a joined up way as far as function? And remember, that can be anything. That can be, we could be talking about muscle, we could be talking about bone, we could be talking about cells, hormones, we could be talking about a nutritional aspect, although there's a bit of a minefield as far as that's concerned. Please check out the gallery on the functionalanatomy.com on the website. I've got a scar course coming up, and I cannot tell you how excited I am about going to look behind the scenes as far as scars are concerned. We're going to look at what is going on and how far does that scar tissue spread, and how might that affect as far as function is concerned with people that are coming in. So thanks very much. I will see